Hi, everybody. Welcome. Today is Friday, April 30th, and this is Michael Bracy with the Music Policy Forum, and I'm so happy to welcome all of you to this week's edition of Music Policy Forum Live, our weekly conversation show where we talk with all sorts of people involved in the music community who are all working together to try to see what we can do to create stronger, more resilient, and more equitable music ecosystems across the board. Today, we've got a packed program as we celebrate International Jazz Day. We're going to be talking to a bunch of leaders in the jazz community about some initiatives and some perspectives and ideas, and really going around the horn with some really fascinating people. So we're thrilled about that. Before we get into the meat of our program, again, for those of you who are with us all the time, you know how this works. For those of you who are new, welcome to our program. We so appreciate everybody spending some of their Friday with us. We know how remarkably busy this time is for everybody in the music community. If you are so inclined, don't feel obligated, but if you're so inclined and feel like you'd like to put your name and location into the chat, you're more than welcome to do so. It's always great to see where people are joining us from. If you have questions throughout today's session, feel free to use the Q&A window, and we'll try to take as many questions as we have time for. And again, this program, like all of our programs, is being recorded and will be part of our Music Policy Forum archive, along with the programs we've done basically every Friday for a year. So if you see something you like today and you think your friends or colleagues would enjoy, we'll encourage you to find that link and forward it around to your people after the show. As always, we like to start with some news and updates from the community. Obviously, the big headline for many of us this week was the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant portal finally reopening, and word on the street is there are about 17,000 applications are in the queue and are being processed by SBA, and there's no real clear timetable on how long it's going to take to process those applications and get money in the street. It could be as soon as a couple of weeks, it could go longer, but certainly that's an important benchmark and milestone for all of us in the community that have been waiting eagerly for the application process to kind of move to the next stage. So we're excited about that. Also of note, again, many of you followed this carefully, but President Biden gave his first address to Congress this week and laid out a sort of something at the intersection of an ambitious but also hyper-pragmatic view of the future, including a lot of discussion about infrastructure and the need to rebuild America, and certainly a lot of what our program has focused on for the past year and continues to focus on is where does art and culture fit into that as we think about core infrastructure. Again, we need to think of music not as sort of just another consumer marketplace or just sort of another entertainment industry, but rather something that is fundamental to our identity and to our health and to who we are as human beings. And that needs to be reflected in policy and funding. And we're very excited to continue to explore what that looks like in terms of this administration and what's going to happen in Congress in September with the infrastructure bill and all other opportunities moving forward. I also, again, we like to shout out members of our community that are doing exciting things, interesting things. Our dear friend Aaron Myers here from in the DC area. It's record release day for Aaron. His new album Pride came out today. We're really happy for him and applaud him and everybody who worked to contribute to that record, that new album. He was going to join us today, but he has a live stream coming out as part of DC Jazz Fest, is hosting a live stream concert at 3 p.m. Eastern. So when you're done with today's show, just hop over and enjoy that live stream and enjoy some live music on International Jazz Day. So lots going on, but we have a lot to cover with our guests today. And Anna Chalenza, my co-founder at Music Policy Forum and co-conspirator on all sorts of things, is going to ride shotgun with us. Anna, why don't you say a quick hi if you don't mind?
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. And what a great topic. I'm really excited.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about, just real quick, Anna, to set the stage. You've been writing, thinking about studying, teaching jazz for a long time. As you kind of enter a day of reflection for International Jazz Day, what is your general sense of where jazz is and some of the things we should be looking at and talking about today in our conversation?
Well, one of the things that I would say I've also been sort of teaching jazz history this semester, and it's been fascinating to do that online when a lot of venues are closed, and just have those conversations with students. And I think one of the big things is the fact that jazz is a musical language that connects with social justice issues and helping us see a little better the world around us, both with its joys and its injustices. And I think during the past year, it's been amazing to see how jazz musicians, even though they often weren't able to gather together, how they were able to really engage in that social aspect of jazz and the social justice aspect. And that's why I'm so excited about Aaron Meyer's album, because it does that in a major way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we're thrilled to have you jump in with all kind of questions, comments throughout the day, and let's formally bring in our first guest, Dave Ankers. Dave is the director of content for the legendary WWOZ in New Orleans, all of our favorite radio station, and we're so happy. I know it's a crazy time at the station with festing in place, but thank you so much for joining us for a few minutes at the top of the show.
Yeah, it's great to join you. I'm always eager to talk about WWOZ. And Festing in Place is happening in the studio right now. And for people who aren't familiar with WWOZ, I'll just give you the spiel. WWOZ is a community radio station in New Orleans that is 40 years old, 40. And it's all run by volunteers. It's not professional. It's a non-commercial station, but more importantly, we're not affiliated with the university or with something like that, or with a church or something. It is kind of grassroots feeling. And it's all volunteers. These are your next door neighbors playing records for you, is the idea. We do not sound polished at all. In fact, sometimes we sound a little bit shabby, and I'm in charge of that, so I have to own that. But that is something that is refreshing to people, because it is, in today's radio world, in today's media world, a lot of people find it really refreshing to find real human beings actually choosing music for you and having a connection to the music. And this is in a city where the cultural scene is an integral part of life, more so than almost any city in America, possibly only New York is an exception. People move to New Orleans for the culture. They move to be culturally active, to interact with things. I mean, you don't move to New Orleans to say, oh yeah, it's a comfortable house over there, and I'm going to stay home and watch NCIS and Game of Thrones every night. I mean, we all do that anyway, but the important thing is you move here because you love what is different about this place, which is that there is music everywhere, there is culture. People interact with each other in a different way from elsewhere. I mean, I could go into the differences about New Orleans, but that's not so much my point. The thing I want to talk about is how WWOZ is connected to the community, because we're made up of members from the community, and we've managed to become like a central cultural clearinghouse for anything that happens. We're sort of a communication point culturally in the community in a very culturally active city. So we had a pandemic, and what happened is all the music in the city stopped. We stopped having live bands in our studio, which is something we would do constantly, live musicians. And then suddenly everything in the city stopped, and the restaurant stopped, and everything that people loved about New Orleans suddenly became unavailable to them. Some people bugged out for some other part of the country for some reason, whatever. But a lot of people were still here, and the city was very quiet, and it became very depressed. And it was the springtime last year, and we were careening toward festival season, and we didn't know if we could actually have Jazz Fest. At this point, the idea that we would have Jazz Fest, 6 weeks after the lockdown began is, we think it's a stupid idea, but we had no idea what we would have 6 weeks away. When the city announced that we wouldn't have our festivals, I brought forward this idea that I'd come up with. I brought it to my boss. I said, okay, those 2 weekends in the spring are like the high holidays culturally for people. They're the equivalent of Mardi Gras. People think that this is when you get together. This is when all the culture of New Orleans manifests itself, and we hang out at the racetrack for 2 weekends, and it's this big, exciting thing. And not having it was depressing people, and it was depressing an entire city. We came up with this idea to do our regular Jazz Fest broadcast as if it were kind of not pretending it was live, but filling up the same hours, but to do it with actual archived Jazz Fest recordings, many of which we had recorded or other people had recorded. But I partner with the archive of the Jazz and Heritage Foundation all the time. They store my history as the WWOZ history. They store all the history of Jazz Fest and other cultural institutions that are under the Jazz and Heritage Foundation umbrella. And I was very familiar with their collection. I said, okay, well, let's see if we can put something together. So we partnered with them and we put together this 8-day broadcast. And when we announced it, that yes, we would do a broadcast of Jazz Fest where people were thinking they were going to have 2 empty weekends of sadness, suddenly it was an electric effect on the city. And we realized when we went on with the broadcast, like it crashed our streaming provider. I mean, the interest from around the world was massive. It still amazes me. My jaw still drops sometimes when I see the effect that we had by just putting something simple on the air. We put 120 different musical acts on the air over an 8-day broadcast, and they were all historic Jazz Fest recordings, and it blew everybody's mind that they could feel like they were at the festival and they could feel the connection between them. Everybody was doing this communal thing, listening to the radio, sitting in your backyard. And here's the kicker. My boss, Beth Arroyo Utterback, she added this angle to it, which is part of her crazy genius, called Festing in Place. She created this idea that we are actually at a festival. We're just all doing it separately, and we're all connected. And the city embraced this, and fans of New Orleans music and culture who were not in the city around the world were able to do the same thing. So everybody was sending us pictures sitting in their backyard in Reno or in Nigeria or Antarctica, wearing their funky Jazz Fest clothes, sitting next to a radio, eating, drinking something and eating Jazz Fest related food, kind of Louisiana food. And everybody suddenly was at the festival. Even though we weren't, the racetrack where the festival takes place was bolted shut. I mean, you couldn't go in. People would drive by or stand outside and stare into the fence. It's like, I want to be in there. Or they would party outside of it, which is a funny thing that happened. But we created somehow this sense of community, or we took a sense of community and we fed it something to create a celebration. And it was an interesting thing for many, many people around the country, because then what they were able to do, other organizations, other festivals, other cultural things adopted it themselves. And I lost track. There were over like 30 different Festing in Place type things that happened over the rest of 2021. And people at other radio stations and festivals called me asking me what I had done and how we had approached it. And we made it up as we went along. I didn't sleep for 3 weeks. It was weird. And we did it again.
Yeah.
We did it again at Labor Day, and then we did it again over New Year. So this sort of every 4 months thing seemed to work. And we were able to create this sort of festival to give people the feeling of live music, but not just the feeling of live music, the feeling of connection with these other people that you're not sitting next to them, but they're also listening to it at the same time. And it's not just a record or the greatest hits of the Beatles or whatever that you're hearing over the radio. I'm playing you a set that you haven't heard before of Ella Fitzgerald from 1977 at Jazz Fest, and Stevie Wonder comes on as her special guest, and then they perform together. And so the music is really good. Everybody's interested in it. Everybody's listening to it at once, and you feel connected. And this is something that people need. I mean, the cultural need. We were talking about, Michael, is the essential nature of music and culture in your day-to-day life. It's in New Orleans, it's so obvious, so obvious to us. In the rest of the country, it isn't, because we've deluded ourselves to thinking that what we get through national media outlets is enough culturally to get by, and it isn't. And this is the Jazz Fest, the Jazz and Heritage Festival. So it's not all jazz music, right, is the important thing. And yet all this roots music comes from, you can argue, and this is a very loose statement, comes from jazz. And we sort of feel that jazz really comes from New Orleans and, around the turn of the 20th century. I mean, that is where a lot of things in our pop culture, our idea of pop culture, all these different genres of music we experience today, you can trace at least a lot of it back to that period. So that kind of informs everything. And jazz is about musicians who are looking at each other, reacting, doing something communally. It has to do with connections between people. Whereas the previous type of music, which was classical music and stuff, it was about following the directions. It was about following the rules. Jazz is this communal act of everybody having a say. And that follows into blues music and into pop music and into hip hop and everything, because it's about your expression. And WWOZ plays all these musics. We don't just play jazz. So what we were able to do with Jazz Festing in Place, we were able to bring all the different things that we play to people and allow themselves to bond with it. We mixed it all up. If you look at some of our schedules, we put out these Jazz Fest schedule like cubes.
Alex has got that ready to go. So we're actually heading into the final weekend of the Hypothetical Jazz Fest. So
you'll see like that the ordinary Jazz Fest schedule looks pretty much like this, but there's one for every day showing different stages. So we kind of did a parody of it, which is our schedules. And you'll see today we have DeVell Crawford, who's a genius New Orleans R&B piano player, but very much New Orleans style. Followed by Ellis Marsalis, which is straight ahead jazz, very contemporary jazz. Then Ivan Neville, his funk band. Then we have Duke Ellington, which I think just ended from the first Jazz Fest in 1970. Then a brass band, and then a funk rock trio of the Joe Crown Trio, and then Al Hurt for 1970, and then another brass band, and then more jazz. Then in the middle of it, we have the Allman Brothers Band, which is a very roots-based rock band. Just showing you all the different things. We wind up with Irma Thomas at the end of the day. If you look through the rest of the schedule, you'll see a lot of different roots-based music plus some pop stuff. We have Carole King, and we had James Taylor and Willie Nelson and Tina Marie, because these are also people who played the festival over time. Yeah. And people are looking forward to hearing those things.
I mean, if I can just, sorry, Mike.
Good, Anna.
No, go ahead. I love questions. It'll help.
No. So, I mean, I love this, the fact that you highlighted the, Fest in Place, because this is a power that radio has that I don't think people always remember when you compare it to, say, streaming. With streaming, you're doing it on demand, but you don't know who else is listening. But there's this idea of when you listen to radio or when you listen to this festival like this, you know that at this exact same moment, there are other people around the world listening to the exact same thing. And that creates this sort of imagined community, which is super powerful. And that's a power radio really has.
Absolutely. And radio, which is something I've been in radio my entire adult life, even before I was an adult, when I was 14 years old and I had a radio show in high school at the local college. Radio is different from all other media. Radio is you're having a one-on-one conversation with an unknown number of people. Let's say it's 8,000. You're just not hearing what they're saying back to you. You're not talking through a loudspeaker at people. You're actually been invited into their space. It's an intimate thing. You're invited into somebody's mind. You turn on the radio because you don't want to be alone in the space. You want to create music, and you're allowing that person into your head to carry them around with you. It's much more intimate than television. Because you do other things. You cook dinner while you're listening to the radio. You're driving while you're listening to the radio. This person is a companion, and it's better. And you turn on the radio because your life with it on is better than with it off. That's the simple transaction. But when I go on the radio, and I go on the radio to do the credits every night, I realize that I'm speaking directly, like I'm across the table, to 10,000 people. There's an intimacy and an immediacy that you cannot replace. Even though a lot of the people who are checking out Festing in Place are streaming around the world, and you're allowed to go back for up to 2 weeks on our website to re-listen to shows. So there's a lot of that happening these 2 weeks. But in reality, most people are listening live, and they know that there's 8,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 other people listening at the same time.
Yeah.
And it is just knowing that changes your relationship to it.
No, it really does. And Alex, thanks for putting the schedule on screen, and the link to OZ is in the chat. If people want to go check out Festing in Place after the program today, after you've seen Aaron's live stream, you can hop over to OZ. And it's just, and we've talked about, the power of community radio. We talk about it, feels like every week, and we'll talk about it moving forward. And, I just know anecdotally when OZ was able to stream for the first time, that opened up a sort of connection to New Orleans for people who love the music and love the culture and love the community that never really was accessible before. And just again, anecdotally, the way for people to feel that connection and feel like they can come back and do the rhythms of the city. And if it's not Jazz Fest, coming for other festivals or other parts of the season, it's just been, OZ is such a critical part of that. So Dave, I know you've got to get back to Jazz Festing and we've got to move on to Sara. But thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing Festing in Place and just a little bit of taste of what OZ's been up to. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes,
take care.
Thank you. And happy to bring in Sara Donnelly, who is in charge of the jazz portfolio at South Arts, the regional arts organization. Sara, do we have you still? There she is.
Yeah, I didn't know I had to do that. Okay. Hello, everybody.
We all got to do everything.
I'm happy to be here. I love this series. I'm a friend of Michael's, and I want you to all know that the John Coltrane blue train behind his head is always there. He did not put it up just to be cool.
That's right. Thank you, Sara, for clarifying.
Because I love it. But also, public broadcasting, public radio, OZ, of course, to me is central just as central as WPFW is in Washington, D.C., where you still have, that's a Pacifica station, but you still have singular curation where individuals really have an identity with their shows and they play what they want to do. And so I just feel very fortunate, and it is happening. It is managed by Katia Stitt, who is Sonny Stitt's daughter. So we have a big tie-in today. Good to see you too, Anna. And I'm going to jump right into Jazz Road because that's what I'm here for. Jazz Road actually is started as a 4-year initiative in 2018, frankly. By 2019, Michael and I were actually holding convenings all around the country to try to get feedback about what type of program we wanted to create around touring and residency work and empowering artists to do this kind of work. So I'm going to put a plug in right away to the funders. That would be Doris Duke Charitable Foundation with additional support by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation's huge jazz lovers. Obviously, I would say that this program is one of the largest in philanthropy dedicated to jazz over the years. And I have been very excited to work with it. I'm going to also say public radio, since you brought it up, which is also very much a facet of what's possible in my programs. Doris Duke recently, in a very, I think, almost radical move, dedicated some funding to a circuit of jazz public radio stations, acknowledging how crucial they are to the community. So
we were able to talk about that a couple of weeks ago with Bill Johnson. It's super exciting. The jazz.
Yeah. So full circle. Jazz Road Tours immediately was formed to empower individual jazz artists to drive the creation planning of their small tours. Everything about Jazz Road is artist-centric and artist-driven, including individual artists actually applying for grants as applicants and receiving funds and managing the whole orientation of their grant experience. To have individual artists get money to tour in the United States has been absolutely explosive for artists pretty much at every level of their career. There's an assumption that only emerging artists have not toured, and career artists that have been on festival marquees have toured a lot, and even legends have toured a lot. And frankly, we all know in the jazz world that there is not much touring in the United States, period. And the pandemic has absolutely underscored that. So to be able to support individual jazz artists to go to different areas of the country, the commitment by the funders and South Arts. Oh, I should have, let me back up. I didn't even say where I'm from. Let me just back. I'm the director of jazz at South Arts, and South Arts is one of the regional arts organizations in partnership with 5 others, created initially by the National Endowment for the Arts and working in partnership with the NEA and also member state arts agencies. So here we are in the South directing this program. The funders absolutely approached a Southern organization with the mindset that this music has traditionally always come from the South. The history of music in the South continues, whereby artists that are born there still need to come up here, to come to New York, to come to all the hubs that exist. They have to leave home. And so the creation of the program really also revolved around bringing music to many different areas of the country that artists have not been to before. Certainly rural outreach, and ultimately tours are successful when you have strong artistic quality and a tour that is put together as an amalgam of 3 to 6 dates that could be very different from each other. It's eclectic. It also acknowledges the DIY scenarios that were actually really popping up when this program was first being designed. So it is when we look at the first 31 tours that were supported in October of 2019, we had 31 fantastic tours. They're all on our website. By the time we got to March of 20, half of them were impossible. So half of my grant program had to be put on pause because tours were not possible. And we lost many amazing tours. When we were talking about the festival in New Orleans, well, we also have the festival Big Ears in Knoxville. And several of our tours were going to be routed through that event. So the best news has been that South Arts has been really flexible about that support. And we are allowing artists to just come to terms with how are they going to restructure this activity. And it's been really important to talk with them in creating the next program that I'm about to tell you about. So, but I did want to just say right now that Jazz Road Tours was changed to a rolling submission. There is no deadline. We are open now for those artists, and we have supported already 18 tours in the beginning of 2021 through August, primarily to artists that are maybe going to the South, maybe in warm climates for outdoor dates, working with smaller spaces that are not taking huge financial risks when they have low attendance. And ultimately, artists being so committed to getting back on the road, really, really persistent about making these dates happen. So please go to our website where you will see what we are doing. And I just want to say that the program is currently open and I'm getting some really exciting applications, which I'll talk about in a minute. Let's go to the fact that the second prong of the program is creative residencies. When it was initially framed, people thought about residencies, traditional residencies, the idea that artists generally, if you really wanted to be clear, you thought about something like the MacDowell Colony or, standalone organizations that provide residencies that are usually times for artists to be isolated and transformed in their creativity because they have a lot of solitude and can really focus. We are not doing that per se. We looked at creative residencies and we thought, well, how does that work in our field? Our field is that generally there are partnerships between artists and types of presenting organizations. And generally, I'd even say that presenting organizations that want to do residency work because they want to actually produce larger scale work and allow artists to use their resources, those are always the traditional models. So I had to look at a lot of stuff. First of all, the program is slated to continue through June of 22. So it's going to be a really interesting time because obviously 3 years of programming has radically been altered into something that is almost not recognizable. And we've lost a lot of space and time. And so we're going to see how things move forward. But meanwhile, I thought we need to really think about how residencies work. And usually residencies take a lot of time. We don't want to do that right now. I spoke to so many artists that said, when I think about residency, first of all, I'm not leaving my house. The pandemic, I'm just not leaving, period. I talked to other artists that said, this is amazing. What I've learned in the pandemic is that I do not need this current business model that jazz is almost trapped in at times. Artists have realized that it's been really great to get away from certain circuits and the way contracts work and middle people work and negotiating engagements, et cetera. Artists really want to be independent. They have been in isolation. They've had this creative incubation, shelter in place, creativity in place. And now, of course, they are hungering to collaborate and be with people and develop new work and completely immerse themselves in very important community work for their art. Looking at community work and engagement also very much tied into the times. And like the fact that we have projects that are very much about, looking at social change and responding to George Floyd right now, So I'm off a little bit. So we just said, we're going to open creative residencies very broadly. Some people will say, where's the residency? But we decided that individual artists should be able to create what is most going to fulfill them creatively and or in the community, embracing community, embedding community, allowing artists to bring their music to communities that they want to bring it to, not that they are dictated to bring it to because they are doing a presenter partnership and they are supposed to do master classes and meet board members, et cetera, et cetera. So the program, Creative Residencies, 2 prongs. You can be coming in for creative development, everything from writing music at home to recording with a band or rehearsing music that has been stagnant over this pandemic, reuniting with band members, connecting anew with new collaborators. And then we also allow for videography. We allow for very personalized residency experiences, basically. And when you look at the guidelines, I guess we'll pop them up, but it's really, we can, but you're going to www.jazzroad.org.
It's in the chat. Yep.
Oh, there it is. Thank you.
Yep.
We launched this program Monday, you guys. I'm here because International Jazz Day completely overwhelms me because I just launched a program on Monday. And this is actually the setting that I want to be in because it's rich conversation. And I love the fact that we are also about to move to how jazz education is presented in the HBCU environment. And the fact that the South is the primary home for majority of HBCUs, I believe. But so back to creative residencies. Monday at launch, deadline is July 1. Projects won't begin until late October. And so we really are looking at an 8-month frame right now. And that means that artists can support very small projects for $5,000. Individual artists can also apply for $40,000 because they are managing a larger ensemble. They are paying adequate fees. This is about adequate compensation every step of the way. I should have said that for tours and residencies. And I am so excited to see what's going to come in. I wrote so many possibilities in the guidelines. And finally, running an artist-centric program and allowing an individual artist to create a $40,000 budget, we have made the decision that we are not interested in seeing how that budget is matched. We do not require a match, and we don't need to know exactly what other income could be coming toward the project. So with that in mind, that's what I want to say. I do want to talk for a second about partnership because the program is absolutely allowing partnership, but we do not mandate that these projects involve partners. But let's not step away from the fact that now we have an opportunity to also help jazz clubs that have completely fallen apart, jazz festivals that want to bring artistic directors in and they just don't know if they can cover the fees, We have an opportunity for individual artists to say, I want a week at the Blue Note, and I am going to make it really different. And I'm going to cover most of my fees because this club is completely obliterated by the pandemic. Partnership will always be defined by the artist and the partner. We are not involved in managing that. But it does mean that artists in this program have two opportunities. They can actually drive it entirely solo or with, collaborating with artists, or they can collaborate with partners. And partners are also incredibly non-traditional. We have listed everything from churches to bookstores to bodegas to libraries, universities, et cetera. So it's all in there. And I just want to say, I think I'm almost out of time, but we are going to support a lot of these. And so I really would like to spread the word about this program. The application, those artists that are not used to applying for grants, I hope that those on this call that are, and those in the community that you embrace, Michael, that you all can get involved in helping artists learn more about grant making. And I mean, not that you're going to be writing jazz applications, but I think you get the point. Because again, we just really want to empower artists to drive these projects. And I guess what I would just say is that the criteria still absolutely requires high artistic excellence, artists that can really show a record in their career. Because again, usually residencies catapult an artist to another section of their career. It's very unclear right now where any careers are. And, but we do want these experiences to be exceptional. We don't want this to be run of the mill, and we want it to be exceptional. And finally, community engagement, again, needs to be very heartfelt, unique, sincere, genuine connection, where a lot of different possibilities can occur between community. Community can be defined in so many different ways. Community partners can be defined in so many different ways. So
Sara, thank you then. And,
done.
Same with, Dave's conversation, we easily could fill the whole hour just digging into the stuff. And I wish we had more time for all this stuff, but just to echo a couple of things that you're doing or that we kind of take away from the work that you and your colleagues at South Arts and the foundations are doing. I think first is this really kind of pragmatic recognition that, going back years, that the existing commercial marketplace just isn't enough, and that if we really truly want to value, in this instance, jazz as an art form, we need to have some radical interventions to think about how do we get money on the street and how do we engage audiences. And we don't have time to kind of dig deeper into that, but sort of implied and the whole design of Jazz Road is that there's a whole community of people that would love to get and become jazz fans, would like to be the next generation of supporters, but the access is just typically not there. It's not that easy, to kind of be in there. So being creative and innovative in terms of how do you, both pay artists, really good wages to go out and do their craft while also trying to get in front of new people is such a smart sort of intersection of how do we take two really important priorities and kind of combine them. I love thank you, Tia from Seattle, for the great comment in the chat. And we definitely are excited to kind of do anything we can do to help spread the word about the residencies and the flexibility around them. And certainly, I mean, I know we've all gone through a really difficult and traumatic 18 months, just in terms of shutdown and dealing with all those realities. And it's going to be amazing to see this community get back up on their feet and kind of what comes next.
Yeah, and I do have to just plug 1 second is that we did develop an emergency fund for jazz artists. And across the nation, in 42 states, we supported 450 artists with $1,000 awards. So we're still looking at how to help artists recover all the time. And thank you. Yeah. And I hope you got that the program is national, in case you didn't. Jazz Road is national.
Yes, yes. Operated out of South Arts, but national in scope. And again, Sara, thanks. We'll have you back down the road to check in on how the residencies are going and the tours are going. And it's great to see you as always. Thanks for
Thank you so much.
With us.
Good to see you too.
Awesome. And Ariel, love to bring you in with Ira and Sais.
Awesome.
How are you, Ariel?
Doing well.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
So
Thank
many
you
of you
so
know
much.
Ariel from the 15 hats that she wears as a consultant and strategist, and great work with Kennedy Center, great work with the Lewis Prize. Did a wonderful session with us last year at the Music Policy Forum Intensive in November. And I'm just so excited to learn about what you're up to with the HBCUs. And let me just kind of turn over to you to set up this part of the conversation, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having us. So I'll keep it very, very short. Back in September, I was invited to help support a group of professors from across the nation. And I've been volunteering with them ever since in recognition that out of more than 100 HBCUs, only 6 have jazz grant degree programs. And only 2 of those schools have master's degree programs. We're really lucky to have Sais, Kamalidiin, who is a professor at Howard University, one of those colleges that have a master's degree program in jazz, as well as the founder of the HBCU Jazz Education Initiative, Ira Wiggins, who will hop on to share more about the founding of this organization, all the incredible work that's been underway. Professor Wiggins?
Good afternoon, everyone. For some reason, I can't get the videos.
There you are.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. So I'm the director of jazz studies at North Carolina Central University. Been there since 1986. So the organization, as you've heard, is the Historically Black Colleges and Universities Jazz Education Initiative. It was formed in July 2020 as a result of a questionnaire that was sent around to departments of music, chairs, directors of bands, choral activities, and concerned professional musicians and interested persons in the area of jazz education. As a result of that initial meeting, a board of directors was formed, and subsequent meetings were planned with the mission statement, other documents, website development, and planning for a nonprofit status and expanding our outreach. So the basic mission is to establish more degree programs in HBCUs and to address the shortfalls in the representation of the degree programs and concentration in jazz studies. Secondly, is to establish community training programs for middle and high school students in as many communities that we can foster to educate and train our youth beyond the high school programs, to give them supplementary training in the history and performance of the music, and also just basically the consuming of the music. And lastly, this need is based on historical, cultural importance, the educational impact of music majors and the general student in the population of colleges and universities. And there's also an economic impact because the training of our students will afford them the opportunity to teach jazz in public schools, art schools, colleges and universities, and to gain employment in a variety of music careers in terms of performance, film scoring, arranging for pop artists, jazz artists, and so on. And I would like to bring one of my colleagues, the Vice President of the organization, Professor Sais Kamalidiin. He will speak about the mission statement and provide some statistics concerning the current disparity in the area of music education throughout the nation, including specifically jazz music education. Professor Kamalidiin.
Oh, I'm ready. I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, let me thank you for having us. That's number one. I'm Sais Kamalidiin. I've taught music at Howard University for the past 25 years. I'm the person who teaches the jazz history. I teach the ethnomusicology. And this is an issue that's very near and dear to my heart. Oh, and by the way, since you had Mr. Ankers on, I'm one of the programmers at WPFW. So that's all. I'm a firm believer in the power of radio in this community and every community. Our mission statement is critically important because of some very dire facts. Non-HBCU colleges and universities, 120 of them have fully degree granting programs for jazz studies. You can earn a degree, sometimes bachelor's, sometimes master's degree, at non-HBC universities. 30 non-HBC universities have concentrations in jazz studies. Of the approximately 100 HBCUs in the United States of America, 5 have degree granting programs in jazz studies. As you can see, that's a disparity that the situation has gone on for too long in that kind of proportionality. So we have to get the HBCUs who have music programs, sometimes very profusely dispersed, sometimes very successful music programs, but no jazz. Most places have a jazz band or a jazz group, but to get a full service curricula in these universities, they would have to have a program, and we don't have that program. And that's what this organization is dedicated to, alleviating that circumstance.
That's terrific. So where are you in the process of launching the organization? What are sort of the next steps that we should be looking for over the next year or so as the organization comes together?
Okay, we can let
I can jump in on that. So, over the course of the past 6 months or so, we've been deep in our research processes and galvanizing community stakeholders to really address this issue within their own HBCUs. We host biweekly meetings with professors across various HBCUs, as well as advocates and artists that see this gap and want to strategize and build some brainstorming around how to move forward. So right now, the biggest portion of our work is in getting the word out, and letting folks know that this gap exists. And in the meantime, we are in the process of incorporating the organization as a 501c3. We're hopeful that we'll be able to launch, the organization in that way within the next 3 to 6 months or so. But in the meantime, we encourage everyone to sign up to our email listserv and be on the lookout for more information as that takes place. But in the course of the conversations that I've had the privilege of being in over the past 6 months, it's just been made abundantly clear how many layers of systemic issues have, really been in place across the music industry that have led us to this place. I mean, I hate to speak ill of arts institutions working at one full time, but I have seen firsthand how just the budget structures within these institutions go towards Western classical music and don't go towards the traditional music that comes from America, from us, from Black Americans in particular. And so ultimately, it's our goal to drive more resources, more attention, and more work behind addressing this need in order to ensure that the legacy of this music continues.
If I can jump in, I think this is an incredibly important program on so many levels. And, I'm also a musicologist. And so I think, as was said, some of these schools might have a jazz band, but to have the full program is where you really it's so that it's not just about the students who are participating and playing an instrument, but really understand the importance of it. I mean, even Congress has said, this is an important national treasure and needs to be in the schools. So it is fascinating to me, like which schools have sort of had jazz programs and which ones don't. I'm curious, the HBCUs, did there used to be more programs and they have shrunk, or is it that we're at a peak of programs that have been in the HBCUs?
There has been a tremendous amount of programs in the past that flourished. Southern University, for example, had a program that was nationally known, but oftentimes the program is the brainchild of one person. And when that person departs from the scene, the program departs also. And there's not a tremendous amount of interest on the part of other faculty to take on that mantle. and keep it going. So presently, Southern has no program. But I want to add also, you said you were a historian.
Yes.
The presence of a program guarantees that there's going to be a history component to the education of the student. When you don't have a program and you just have a band, then it's kind of like you're speaking a language, but you don't know what the words mean. And maybe you speak the language quite well, but the legacy, the heritage that goes behind every utterance is lost.
Yeah, and I think that this is so important, just what you said about, it's dangerous to kind of build a program around one person and when that person leaves. So I think that it's so important what you all are doing, because you are creating the infrastructure needed to go from school to school to create a full system.
Right. Yeah, and one quick note, even along that, is I know, Anna, you teach at Georgetown, and Aaron Broadus used to be the jazz band director, I believe, there. And he was taught at Howard, one of those organizations or schools that have that master's degree programs. He got his master's at Howard. So even that, in this call, right, speaks to the importance of having those spaces and opportunities, because they end up infiltrating all of the spaces we work within. So just wanted to give Aaron Broadus a shout out.
Oh, yeah.
Just to kind of pull together a couple of the of the themes we've talked about today, I'm really out of my league as a jazz appreciator, and so I really shouldn't say anything about jazz at all. But my very uninformed sort of sense of the community of the jazz industry and of the community is. You need the historical context, not everybody, but for many people, having that historical context is so critical to really appreciate what you're looking at. Because again, if you read a jazz review in the newspaper, typically it's sort of a catalog of this player played with this person who was influenced by this person. And if you don't know what that means, if you haven't experienced that, you're just reading names. And it's very hard to understand what does that mean in practicality. And it seems like one of the opportunities we talked earlier today about WWOZ going from a terrestrial radio station to a global streaming service, essentially, because they're able to stream, and reach audiences everywhere. We have similar opportunities with digital technology, where again, like if I was, really lucky, to see some high quality, big band stuff when I was in middle school, at the local community center. But if I wanted to then follow up and learn more about that genre, that art form, or those performers, I'd have to go to the record store or the library. Now, if there's something you're curious about, you can get the entire history of recorded music at the click of a button, which gives you opportunities as a fan to kind of dig deeper and then get more into the thing. And so I'm just interested in that connection between how are we leveraging these opportunities for more access and more availability to get into either both the history of music and also what's happening now, and what that means in terms of building the capacity to have the context and the history and the discussion around it. Does that question even make sense?
Certainly it does.
Great.
YouTube is one of the great blessings and great banes of music. The fact that you have so much music at your disposal, as you said, at the click of a button, it deceptively leads a person to take it for granted. You say, "Oh, okay, I can. It's always there for me. I don't have to spend the cost of a recording." In the past, if you wanted music, a specific kind of music, you had to have the money, go to the record store, hope they had it or order it, purchase it, take it home, have quality playback equipment. And then you can enjoy music. Today, the persons are often jaded because they have so many avenues for music that cost them, they perceive, very little. And so if it's free, then I have a tendency to take it. What's the value of this if I can get it so easily, so quickly? And the fact that there's so much information on the internet, but there's very little filter. There's not a way to discern what's really real, what's really important. What should I learn first? What's more esoteric, and I can wait until my knowledge base gets a little more foundational that I can add on. It's very deceptive to to a student or even a person who just wants more knowledge, it's good to have a practitioner. It's good to have a person of deep insight who's trained for years to help guide this research, to help guide the understanding. And it's only in a program where the person has been very closely vetted that will allow this person to come in and be an arbiter of taste. Then you can get what we hope is wise counsel as far as understanding this music at a deeper level.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And we've got a terrific question from our friend Catherine Moore, who teaches up at University of Toronto, used to be at NYU. And to kind of summarize the question, she's asking about the sort of relationship between the programs that you're building out and sort of more traditional music business or kind of music economics courses or programs. And do you see, are those kind of intertwining in terms of the business aspect of music and then the jazz pieces that you're building out? Or do you see those as being a little bit separate, or how are you thinking about that balance?
I think Dr. Wiggins has a program like that at Central, so go ahead.
So we do have a law school working with us to for things like intellectual property discussions, copyright, and we do have a business component at the undergraduate level that we're in addition to our master's degree that we're reaching out for. So we're trying to make sure that we're working together and our students have a working knowledge of the business that they're about to enter, so to make sure they are successful in ventures in addition to teaching, and so that they can be well-rounded and make sure they protect their future in terms of the economic impact. So basically, that has to work together for the benefit of the students.
Yeah.
At Howard University, we have a similar program. It's called Music Business. And we try to give every student who comes through some aspect of what it takes to be legally protected. It's not simply enough in the 21st century to be a high quality artist, to be well-versed in the musical aspect. If you don't protect your intellectual property, you will wind up as so many of us did in the earlier decades of the music. Great talent. Everybody acknowledges that you are fantastic. You're a virtuoso, but you are dying penniless with future generations having to pay for a gravestone.
Yep. And Ariel, this is a question I'd like to point to you. And all these issues are so complicated, and there's no easy answers on anything. But I know with your work in the creative youth development field, a lot of the work around sort of connecting teens to kind of cultural practice and sort of using that as platforms for expression and identity and sort of power. And so a lot of that work is rooted in getting out of their way and letting them feel like they've got agency to take art where they want to take art. And I know in jazz, there always feels like there's a little bit of tension between, is it a museum piece? Is it something where we're looking backwards and we're appreciating, John Coltrane, or is it a living form that's going to be innovated on? And I just wonder about, your thoughts, Ariel, and Sais, if you have a thought on this, just the sort of tension of young people with different influences, different ideas, different access to technology, creating on top of, generations of amazing, sort of jazz history. And what does that look like? And do we even still call it jazz in the future?
This is such a fantastic question, and I appreciate you asking it. We've had some really, at times, tough and honest conversations around that. The issue ultimately, though, that I think everyone can agree with is that there's been a huge gap in the education, particularly with Black Americans in this country, in music. And with that, there is this disconnection, quite frankly, between the cultural heritage that we have and the legacy of music that we have in jazz. A lot of people don't recognize that hip hop is born from jazz. A lot of people don't recognize that the banjo is an African instrument. I actually was taught that by Professor Kamalidiin on this call right now. I had no idea until I was 18 years old. And so I think ultimately what we'll want to do is make sure that that legacy of music, that benchmark of music is shared with future generations. And also that we're continuing to embrace all of the various forms that were influenced or born or, cloned even through jazz, right? So that would be my response to that is, we really want to make sure that there's a foundation of knowledge that we continue to share forward as, future generations come up. Professor Kamalidiin?
Part of the challenge is by the time we get the person at 17 or 18 years old, they have had next to no knowledge in an organized fashion imparted to them about our legacy, our musical heritage. And we have in 4 years the daunting but welcomed challenge of giving people a foundation upon which to base their jazz studies degree in this instance. It's criminal to send a young person and have them learn everything about everybody else, to be taught that what others have done is what should be held most dear. And when you ask them, well, what have you done? What is your contribution to world culture? While it's truly great, in reality, they have no answer. They don't understand what it is that we have contributed to the world, but especially to America.
That is such a great comment to kind of close on, because it's, again, we talk about this in our program every week, but the United States is just so unique in that if you think about, an art form with the power and the importance and the scope of jazz in a different country, it would be treated a lot differently by our institutions, by our funders, by our government. And just in today's, program, just kind of going around the horn, we can get some insight into, if we put more resources towards the future of public and community radio and really allow them to reach the scale that they need. If our philanthropists and the work that Sara and South Arts and others are doing are able to go to a different scale, if we can see the HBCUs get the level of investment that this administration is talking about and really bringing this up forward, we have an opportunity to really transform how we think about jazz, how people are exposed to it, growing a market for it, appreciation for it. We know where this can go, and it's really up to us collectively if we want to do that. And hopefully, we have some momentum and we're moving in the right direction. But, clearly, the sort of existing commercial marketplace sort of model that we've used for decades is not going to, get the job done. So we need some different thinking, and we need some real resources and innovations and different ways of doing this. Ariel, thank you so much for helping lead this conversation. Professor, it's such an honor to meet you. Professor Wiggins, such an honor to meet you. And obviously, Sara, it's always great to see you. Thanks again to Dave Ankers. Anna, thank you so for joining and riding shotgun. As always, huge thanks to our producer, Alex Dolvin, who makes this program run so easily and so smoothly. Huge thanks to all of you who are spending part of your Friday with us and are watching on the archive. As always, we welcome and encourage your comments, questions, feedback, very kindly worded constructive criticism. You can always email us at musicpolicyforum@gml.com. I hope everybody has a safe and productive weekend, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.